Okay, good morning. Our learning is Leila Nishmas Mindel, Mariam Bas Kalman Ruvain. We're at the top of Tes Zayin Amud Beis, and we are 3 lines down, and we're going to talk about Shimon ben Shetach, and hopefully we have time to learn a little bit of history about Shimon ben Shetach, or at least some of his family members. Hopefully we'll have time. Okay, so Shimon ben Shetach tiken ksuba leisha. Shimon ben Shetach instituted a ksuba for a woman, as we spoke about when we saw this memra mentioned earlier. He wasn't the one who actually instituted ksuba. Ksuba is doraisa, but rather he added a couple of financial pieces to it, essentially delays to ensure that a husband does not immediately divorce his wife, essentially making the ksuba collectible from a karka and not from a taltalin, so that a person would not get mad at his wife and just say, hey, take the car that is for the ksuba and leave, but rather you have to go and you have to sell the land, etc., and therefore it puts a built-in delay to ensure that people stay married and people don't just flippantly get divorced. Okay, v'gazer tuma al matachos. And we also learned that Shimon ben Shetach decreed impurity on metal utensils. Ask the Gemara, and that's the end of the statement. Klima tachos doraisa. Ask the Gemara, what are you talking about? That he instituted metal, that there is a tuma on metal. Metal is doraisa. D'chsiv. Here's the pasuk. Achas zav es hakesef. So we have these psukim in Bamidbar which speak about purity and impurity, and it speaks about the fact that the metals become impure. So clearly, Shimon ben Shetach was not the one who instituted tuma on metals. Metals pre-exist Shimon ben Shetach. Okay, L'nitzrich, the Gemara says no. What it's needed for el tuma yishana, the institution of tuma yishana. We spoke about this yesterday. The notion of tuma yishana is that if a person goes ahead and causes a utensil, or a utensil on its own loses its status of a utensil, which midoraisa means that it loses its tuma, right? So you have a utensil, and then the utensil no longer becomes functional as a utensil. So for example, you have a cup, and the cup has a hole in the bottom. If it has a hole in the bottom, it's no longer a functional cup. And midoraisa, once that happens, the tuma that was there is paka. It goes away. The tumah is gone. Since it's no longer a utensil, the tumah that's there is gone as well. However, Chazal came along and they said, no, even though that's true, midoraisa, they said that when you rebuild the keli, you rebuild the utensil now assumes the tumah properties that it had before. And the Gemara is going to bring the storyline that demonstrates this. Amar Yehuda Amarav, Maisa b'shel Tzion Hamalka. There's a story about Tzion Hamalka. Her name was really Shlomit. She was known as Shalom Tzion. That was a nickname of hers because of the fact that she brought peace to Tzion. Over here, she's just called Tzion, but it's all the same person. She is one of the queens of the Hashmonai kingdom, and I really hope we have some time to review her story, which we'll do at the end of the Amud if we get there. So Sha'asa Mishta Levana, she made a big suda, big party for her son. V'nitmu kol kela, and all the utensils became tameh. We could assume that perhaps someone died in the building. There was a death in the building, and there's tumas ohel, and therefore everything in that building became tameh. Okay, so this is quite significant in general. Certainly for a family of Kohanim, this is a big deal. Okay, but so she's a queen, and she's a very bright queen, and a very she's clever. Okay, so what does she do? Shvaratan, she went ahead and she broke all the utensils. She didn't shatter them all. She went ahead with like a pin, or she had her servants do this probably, and basically made a hole, punctured a hole in every single one of the utensils. And there, v'nastantan litzoref, and she then sent them to the smith. V'ritzchan v'asmehen kelim chadashim, and they went ahead, they melted them down a little bit. Okay, put them in some hot whatever in the fire, and then you extend the metal a little bit, and then you fix them, and now they're all tahora, right? They have a party. Imagine you have a party that night, and then someone dies in the building as they're getting ready. One of the waiters dies in the building before the party starts. Okay, everyone's freaking out. Shalom Tzion has a great idea. So what does she do? She goes ahead, she makes all the kelim unusable, okay? And now they lose their tumah, and then she gets their smith to come in quickly, melt all the kelim down, and then put them all back out. Fantastic. We're still able to have the party. Brilliant, right? However, the Chacham came along, and she is a brother to Shimon ben Shetach. And again, we'll learn more about the story, hopefully. And so when it says Chacham, it's presumably talking about Shimon ben Shetach. And he said, Yachzu tumasan yishana. No, too bad. You had a great idea. And biblically, midoraisa, it works. Midrabanan, he says, it goes back to its original tumah. Ask the Gemara, my taima. What's the reason behind this? Mishum geder mechatas nagu ba, because of a concern of mechatas. What is mechatas? Mechatas is the water that is made up of the ashes of the paraduma, which are used to sprinkle on things which become impure. And there's a concern if everyone's just going to be going. And when does that happen? When someone comes tumas mace. Okay, whenever there's tumas mace, you need to sprinkle the water from the ashes of the paraduma. There's a concern if you have this whole shtick that you're basically just to puncture kalim, and that's how they become pure. There's a concern that people are going to forget about mechatas. They're going to forget about this whole institution because they're going to bypass it as much. For many people, it's be much easier, and the whole institution of mechatas will be forgotten. And Chachamim did not want to, entertain that possibility, and therefore they said, nope, too bad. This whole idea does not work. Okay? Yeah. Questions?
Well, I just want to make sure. So this is not a gezerah to a gezerah because we're still talking about clay. matalpos where it's
There's metal. There's metal. Yeah, there's doraisa.
So even though and mechatas is also a doraisa.
Correct. We're trying to maintain
we're not stretching it.
We're not stretching. Correct. We're not stretching it too far. Although again, we saw with Tuma and Tara, we did see sometimes we're a little bit more flexible on the stretch, and presumably that's based on the fact that it is something which is fundamental. Their hand? No. Okay. Says the Gemara. This doesn't necessarily work for everything. Hani chlaman amar lo lechol hatumas amru elu tumas ameis bilvad amru shapir. If this makes sense, this answer of Geder Mechatos makes sense if the only time they made this decree was regarding Tumas Mace. In other words, there are different scenarios where you have something which is Tameh. Not every scenario is somehow Tumas Mace. You have things which are Tameh because a sheretz touched it. You have things which are Tameh because, whatever, a whole zav spit on it. There are different things become Tameh. So if you, and again, we're saying the reason this decree was made was because we're afraid you're going to forget Mechatas. So if it was only made regarding Tumas Mace, which is when you use Mechatas, it makes sense. But if you want to tell me that this was instituted for all tumos, whoa, now this gets to Max's point. You're going to tell me we're going to make a decree. So we're going to make a decree for all tumos, for even tumas zav, you can't do this. Even tumas, whatever, sheretz, you can't do this. That's already going too far, right? If you wanted to, again, if the whole thing is to ensure the remembrance that people will not forget about mechatas, then you'll say this tuma, this gezerah that you can't go ahead, this geder, that you can't go ahead and puncture the keli, will not work by tumas mace, but and that makes sense according to the one who says that this gezerah was only made in that regard. But if you want to tell me the gezerah is made for all types of tumos, why would we go so far? It seems like a little bit too much. So Amar Abaye, with two possible reasons. Amar Abaye, gezerah shemalo yikvenu b'chtei ta'araso. Abaye says the concern is that people are not going to use this shtick properly. They're going to go and puncture. They're going to walk around. Let's say they have like 45 bowls, and they're going to walk around with this needle, and they're going to puncture some of them properly, and some of them it's not going to go all the way through, right? It's hard. You have to go through because, again, keep in mind the person's not even. They're puncturing it for the sake of redoing it, whatever the word might be, but right, smithing it, and to bring it back together. So there's a concern people are not going to puncture it properly, and that's why, even according to, so that's why, and this would be exera for all tumos, because the reason this doesn't work is because although sometimes it makes sense for it to work, but if we allow this to happen, then people are sometimes not going to puncture it properly, and it won't actually be tahora. And therefore Chazal said, you know what, this whole puncturing thing does not work at all. Rava Amar Gzer Shema Yomu Tvila Bas Yoma Olala. Rava says a different reason. Rava says there's a concern whenever we have tvila, so nowadays we associate tvila with the evening time. Most of the tvilos and many of the tvilos in the Torah are actually take place during the day. And what would happen is people go to the mikvah during the day, but they would only become tahora at night, right? So the same would be true for kelim. You're allowed, in certain cases, you will be tovel the kli during the day, but it only comes tahora at night. But now we're going to see a scenario where something is tameh, you puncture it, you fix it, and now there's tahara taking place during the day. And there's a concern that people say, oh, also when you go to the mikvah, another way of purifying things, also you don't have to wait till the night. As soon as you go to the mikvah, it'll be tahora. And therefore Chazal said, no, this whole shtick, which is going to cause people to think that tahara takes place even when you go to the mikvah during the day, we're going to say don't use because it's going to get confusing, and therefore they said this whole shtick of breaking things and fixing it, we're not going to allow people to use. My Beinai, what's the difference between Rav and Abaye? Ika Beinai did Tzafinu Meratzef. In a scenario where it gets completely crushed. In other words, here we're talking about cases like the case of Shlom Tzion is when she punctured the utensil. But let's say a person went ahead and they crushed the whole thing and then they rebuilt it there. No one's going to confuse this as the case where the person immersed something in a mikvah. There you see the process and the thing was completely broken, completely rebuilt. It's like a new item. No one's going to say, oh, if I tovel a kli, I could use it during the day. We say, no, someone made a new item over here and therefore no one's going to get confused. Whereas Abaye is concerned of the fact that you may not do it properly, that's always going to exist. And therefore, even when you crush it down, that concern will still exist. Okay, yeah, good. Let's go to the next case.
We go by Rava.
The Gemara Paskins like Rava, yeah, and therefore it would be permitted if you completely crush it. Okay, one more. Again, we're trying to get the list of 18, the 18 gezeros that were decreed on that day between Hill and Shammai. And again, the Gemara told us, the Mishnah told us that Nimnu v'Gamra, that there was a debate between Hill and Shammai, and ultimately Shammai outnumbered Hillel in those 18 times. That's what the Mishnah told us, and so we're looking for the list of different things where such gezeros took place. Now we're going back to that list. Idach Mahi. What other ones are on that list of 18? Says the Gemara, quotes a Mishnah, it's not Haminiach Kilam Tachas Tatzino L'Kam Lehen Mei Geshamim. If a person places a utensil under a pipe in order to receive rainwater, Echad Kelim Gedolim, V'echad Kelim Ktanim. Whether you placed a big utensil under the pipe or you placed a small utensil under the pipe, whether it is stone, earthenware or made up of even dung, according to some, poslin as a mikvah, the water caught in that bucket is called mayim she'uvin, and it is you're not allowed to use that in a mikvah. Okay, so let's just pause here for a second. A pipe depends on the type of pipe, but oftentimes a pipe will not be there's a concept that you can't use for a mikvah, drawn water. Drawn water is water that is in a utensil, and there's another caveat: you want the water to be there. If you don't want the water to be there, we don't call that mayim she'uvim. Okay, so it has to be that you want the water to be there. A typical pipe is open on both sides. It's not a kli. And so it's complicated, but sometimes we use pipes to get water from upstairs, from the rooftop into the mikvah. It's complicated what type of pipe has to make sure it's not really receiving it in any way. But we're talking about that type of pipe where it's not, the pipe itself is not going to be considered she'uvin. It's the bucket on the bottom, right? The bucket on the bottom, whatever water, if you placed a bucket under a pipe, right, it seemingly is indicating, I want the water in that bucket. And therefore, any water in that bucket is called mayim she'uvim, and you cannot use the water from that bucket to now pour it into a mikvah. That's mayim she'uvim that would passel a mikvah. Okay? So the Gemara says, Echad hameniach v'echad hashocheach. Divrei Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says, whether I placed it there deliberately or I placed it there by mistake, that is enough of intent, and therefore it would be mayim she'uvin, and it would postel the mikvah. Beis Hillel b'tarm b'shocheach. Beis Hillel says no. If you placed it there deliberately, implying I want it there, then I can. Then it's pasel. But if I forgot about it, then it's tahora. Yeah, am I going too fast? Are you with me? Yeah. Amar Rameir. Rameir says Nimnu v'Rabu Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. So Rameir says, and now we can understand why we just quoted this, that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argued about this, and Beis Shammai was counted over Beis Hillel. This seems to be our case, right? At least according to Rameir, this would be one of the 18 gzeros where Beis Shammai outnumbered Beis Hillel. Okay. Now the Mishnah continues. Although Beis Shammai said if I place it under a pipe and I forget it there, then the water there is mayim she'uvin. However, if I put it in a field there and just left it in the field, there we could assume it wasn't put deliberately. And anyway, that's completely forgetting, and therefore the water gathered there is not called mayim she'uvin, right? So in other words, placing it under a pipe is by definition, even if I forget it there and I put it there like somewhat absentmindedly, that's enough of a deliberateness to consider it to be mayim she'uvin, that I want it there. Whereas if I leave my utensils in the field, all right, sometimes you leave something in the field, you don't want it there, and therefore that's called shochech. Rav Yossi. Rav Yossi, though, disagrees with Rameir. He says, Adai machlokas bimkomo omedes. That the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel was never ascertained. They never voted, okay? And therefore, according to Rav Yossi, it's not one of the 18. He says the machlokas omdain omedes, meaning they're still debating this point. It was never, meaning the list of 18 were 18 times Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai argued, they voted, and Beis Shammai was the majority. But Rav Yossi says, no, this is not one of the cases. They never voted on this. Okay, we're going to have to come back according to Rav Yossi. He's missing one from our 18 list. We'll come back to him. Okay, we'll come back to him soon. Rav Yisharshia, Dvei Rav, and we have another qualification for the Mishnah we just read. Now we have a Morag statement. Rav Yisharshia says from the base measure of Rav, Amri Akol Modim Shenicha Mishas Kishur Avim Timeim. B'shas Pizur Avim Tiber Kol Tahorin. So he says a different qualification. Both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that when I placed the buckets there, well, there was kishur avanim. Kishur avanim literally means the nodding of the clouds. What does that mean? When it starts getting cloudy, so I know it's going to rain, and I put utensils out after that, then I clearly, whether I say, I did it on purpose, it was cloudy, and everyone sees the clouds, it's getting dark, and I put utensils outside, that's certainly going to be a case of that it's tamei. I definitely wanted them. B'shas pizra avanim, if I come outside when the clouds start to dissipate, Divrei Kol Tahorim. Then both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel would agree it's Torah there, because I did not assume that it's going to rain. Lo nachlaku ela shenicha mashas kishur avim v'nispazru v'chazru v'niskashru. They only argue. He's qualifying the above debate in the Mishnah. He's saying they only argue where it was placed when the clouds were coming out, when they were starting to tighten, and then the clouds start to dissipate. They start to spread. Okay, v'chazru v'niskashru, and then the clouds, and then it gets cloud, and then I put it outside at that point, and then it gets cloudy again and starts to rain. Right? So again, if I put it out when the clouds are coming out, everyone agrees, tamei. If I put it out when the clouds are dissipating, everyone agrees I didn't intend to put it there, tahora. If I put it there, if let's say it started getting cloudy, and then I didn't put it out, and then the clouds start going away, and I put it out, and then it starts to rain, okay? It's like Baltimore, right? It's like all confusing. Then that's machlokes. Marsavar batla machshavto. Beis Hillel says that my intent is batal. He says, no, my intent is not batal. In other words, what we're saying over here is as follows. that if you look at Rashi, the first wide line of Rashi, Balam Achshavto, Dechi Nispazru, once they start to separate, Asach Daite, then like it's like I have Hesach Hadas, Desavar Liyarduk Shamam Od, as soon as they start to spread, I'm assuming there's not going to be any rain, even though I put them out, right? Sorry, I think I misspoke. Again, I see the clouds coming out, and I put them out, right? And then the clouds start to separate. So in such a case, I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, it's not going to rain anymore. And then when the clouds come out, and therefore that undoes my initial action of putting them out because it was going to rain, right? In other words, again, it starts getting cloudy. I'm like, oh, good, it's getting cloudy. I put my kelim out, and then the clouds start to dissipate. I'm like, oh, good, it's not going to rain. Fine, good. So Beis Hillel says, as soon as I had that thought, oh, look, the clouds are no longer there, then my initial action is done. Because I put it out for it to rain, and then it was those clouds that I put them out for stopped looking like it was going to rain. My intent for that rain to fall down is over, and therefore my action with that intent is over, and therefore even though now it starts to rain again, I never had intent for it to rain in those utensils, and therefore Tahora. Beis Shammai says no. I put them out initially because it was going to rain. It's true the clouds dissipated, but the bottom line is the fact that my thought process changed doesn't change the fact that I put them out for rain to fall on them, and therefore Tameim. That's the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Does my thought of the fact that the clouds are not going to cause it to rain because they start to dissipate, is that enough to break up my initial action or not? Okay, that's the debate between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Says the Gemara a little bit further.
And we
yeah.
go by, this is where Beis Shammai wins.
This is it depends, because according to Rameir, according to Rav Yossi, it depends. According to Rameir, yes, Beis Shammai wins in this case. Beis Shammai overrules Beis Hillel. According to Rav Yossi, Adai Machlokes B'Mkoma Omedes. In which case, who would we rule like? If Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel didn't vote, what's the default? Beis Hillel, right? And that's what the Rambam seems to grow with, like Rav Yossi. Right?
Except for the other cases we brought.
The other cases they debated, right? They debated and Beis Shammai ultimately outweighed. But over here, they didn't. Okay. Says the Gemara, Rav Yossi, according to Rav Yossi, who doesn't include this case, which again, it seems like the poskim also don't include this case. They rule like Beis Hillel, right? So he's missing one. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak af benos kusim nidos merisasim bo b'yom gazru, the gzera that benos kusim are tamei merisasim from their crib. That was also nigzar on that day. What's he referring to? So there's a halacha that it's possible, it's very rare, but a child even well before adulthood is able to have a period. Okay, it's very rare, but it could happen. Now halachically, what is the status of her blood at that point, or her at that point? She's tamea, 100%. However, the kusim are a group of quasi-Jews, they sort of converted. It's not so clear if they converted on purpose. What their status is a big discussion in the Gemara, so I think we're going to come back to it later in Masechah Shabbos. But the bottom line is that they had some different halachos. They had some different customs, or their own law, which was different than our law. And they held that a woman cannot become tameh until she's an adult. Okay? So the concern now is that a Jewish minor who bleeds, her parents tell her you're tamea, and they'll treat her as tamea, and therefore any food she touches they'll be careful about. But since the kusim don't treat a child who has a period as someone who's tameh, therefore they're going to touch things and she's going to be tameh. She's never going to go to the mikvah because they don't treat her going to her blood as dam nida, and therefore the things that she touches are tameh, and she never goes to the mikvah until she's an adult. And therefore Chazal, Beis Shammai came along and said, there's machlokas Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai said we should treat them as tameh. All kusim from the day they are born, basically women, from the day they're born, treat them as tameh. Since it's possible she was tameh, and they don't go to the mikvah, and therefore we have to treat them all as tameh. And that was a debate between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. And according to Rav Yossi, that was one of the things in place of this debate about the jugs under the pipes. This was something that was ruled upon by Beis Shammai. Let me just give a quick history. We have 2 more minutes, so I'm just going to give a quick history of Shlomit, or Tzion, as she's called over here. So again, her real name is Shlomit, just fascinating, and I think this Gemara itself, just to me, is a mind-blowing Gemara, because the Gemara her real name is Shlomit. Her nickname is Shlom Tzion because she brought peace to Tzion. There was major civil wars and infighting taking place between the different factions of the Chashmonaim, and amongst the Prushim and Sadukim, the Chachamim, and those who were the Sadducees, who rejected the oral law. So this is about 100 or 119 BCE. Her father-in-law, Yochanan Horkinis, Chashmonai king, goes ahead and kills all the Chachamim. Initially, he was kind to them, but then eventually turned on them. They were questioning his status as a if he's really fit to be a Kohen Gadol, and they did not think so, and they implied that to him, and he was not so happy, as you can imagine, and he went ahead and killed him. Killed all the Chachamim. One of them ran off to Egypt, I think it was, and the other, Shimon ben Shattach, was hidden by his sister, who is Shlomit, or Shlom Tzion, or Tzion, okay? His Shlomit was the daughter-in-law of Yehuda Horkenes, of Yochanan Horkenes, right? So she's really risking her life, like in the palace, in the royal palace, she is going ahead and hiding Shimon ben Shattach, her brother, and ultimately Yochanan dies. Yehuda, who is Yochanan's son, assumes the throne. Okay, and Yehuda, after assuming the throne and killing off a lot of his brothers and family, etc., he dies. And so she goes ahead and she marries Yanai, who is Yehuda's brother. You with me on the family tree over here? I feel like we're doing Yavamas. Okay, fine. She goes ahead, and this is actually Yavamas case because Yehuda had no children with her, and so they do Yibum, and she marries Yanai, who is now the king. And during that time, she puts the Chachamim back in power. She's the one who brings them all back. She gets Yanai to reconcile with the Chachamim. She brings all the Chachamim back, and through her, there's a little bit short period of peace, like 20 years of peace, and through her, the Chachamim really, the Chashmonai king, which was really derailing, becomes much more rooted within the framework of Chazal. Now, what's fascinating is that all the Chachamim, they were in hiding until she comes along. She's the one who comes along and saves them, brings Shimon ben Shattach out of hiding, brings the other sage, I forgot Yehuda, I forgot exactly, from Egypt, and basically they flourish. Okay, and Chazal come along. Just imagine this, right? And she goes ahead. She's very knowledgeable. She does this shtick. Remember the Gemara? She basically punctures holes. She has this big party. She punctures holes, and she knows what she's doing. She's completely right, and they're completely dependent on her politically. What does she do? What did the Chazal do? And Shimon ben Shattach, her brother, whose life is dependent on her, and who saved us and all the Chachamim, they say no. There's a concern. It's going to cause problems, and therefore they say no. All your stuff are Tameah. The boldness, the ability for them, the backbone that they have to not be swayed politically over something that they felt was a serious concern to someone who they owed everything to, who everything was dependent on, is to me just incredible, right? Again, they owed everything to her, and there's a concern. It's a very rocky time for the Jewish people. She could, like her father-in-law, turn on them. They're clearly messing her party up, and nonetheless, they said this is the right thing to do, and they instituted not just like to her party. It was dafka with her. They said, no, you're too influential. People are going to copy you. And therefore they go ahead and make that decree. I'm very impressed with their backbone. Okay, have a wonderful day.